I'm Alexis Ward, and I've spent the last 15 years of my life buried deep in code that most people will never see, protecting systems they'll never know exist. At 38, I've written security protocols that safeguard some of America's most sensitive infrastructure. My crowning achievement, Aegis Corps, runs silently in the background of 7 federal agencies, including the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. It's the digital fortress that keeps our nation's secrets safe, and I built it from the ground up. Most people in my field chase recognition, speaking engagements, magazine covers. I've never wanted any of that. My satisfaction comes from knowing that every successful authentication, every blocked intrusion attempt, every secure data transfer happens because of the architecture I designed. In the world of federal cybersecurity, anonymity is its own form of power. I arrived at Trionix Federal Systems headquarters that morning the same way I had for the past decade, badge in hand. Coffee balanced carefully, mind already parsing through the day's security updates. The Arlington office gleamed in the early November sun, its glass facade reflecting the distant silhouette of the Capitol. I'd helped design the security protocols for this building too, though few people knew that. The elevator ride to the 20th floor passed in comfortable silence. I preferred the early hours, before the sales teams and executives filled the space with their particular brand of corporate energy. My team understood this about me. They knew that between 6 and 8 in the morning, I did my best thinking, reviewing logs and planning system improvements in the quiet of my corner office. But something felt different that morning. Carol from HR gave me an odd look as I passed her desk. Mike from procurement actually stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. I'd worked with these people for years, and suddenly they were treating me like a stranger. The all-hands meeting request had arrived the night before, marked mandatory, and scheduled for 9 a.m. Our new CEO, Vanessa Ryland, had been making these calls weekly since she'd arrived 3 months ago, fresh from a stint at a Silicon Valley startup. She spoke in buzzwords and painted everything in terms of disruption and innovation. Those of us who actually built and maintained the systems that kept the company running had learned to endure these sessions. I settled into my office and pulled up the overnight security logs. Aegis Corps had blocked 17 attempted intrusions across various federal networks, all standard stuff, mostly automated bots probing for weaknesses they'd never find. I made a few notes, adjusted some parameters, and sent a status update to my contact at the Pentagon. Colonel Harrison responded within minutes, as he always did. Another quiet night thanks to you. Alexis, coffee later this week. I smiled at the message. Jim Harrison had been my primary liaison at DoD for 5 years. He understood what Aegis Corps meant for national security, understood it in a way that Vanessa Ryland, with her MBA and her TED Talks, never could. 8:45 came too quickly. I made my way to the main conference room, noting how conversations seemed to stop as I passed. The room was already packed, with Vanessa holding court at the front. She wore one of her signature bright blazers, this one electric blue, gesturing animatedly as she spoke to her inner circle of recently imported executives. I took my usual seat near the back, opened my notebook, and waited. The room filled quickly, the energy shifting as more technical staff arrived. We were the ones who actually delivered on the contracts, who maintained the relationships with federal agencies, who understood that in our business, innovation meant making systems more secure, not more flashy. Vanessa called the meeting to order with her characteristic enthusiasm. "Good morning, Trionix family." She beamed. Several people shifted uncomfortably. We weren't a family. We were professionals doing a job that mattered. "Today marks a pivotal moment in our transformation journey," she continued, clicking to a slide that showed a variety of corporate buzzwords arranged in a circle. "We're not just evolving our business model, we're revolutionizing our entire approach to federal contracting." I caught the eye of Dave Chen from Systems Integration. He looked as skeptical as I felt. Vanessa had been talking about revolution since day one, but our federal clients didn't want revolution. They wanted stability, security, and systems that worked. "As part of this transformation," Vanessa said, her voice taking on a harder edge, We need to address some uncomfortable truths about our organization. We've become stagnant, complacent. We're running on legacy thinking in a digital-first world. The slide changed. It showed an organizational chart with several positions highlighted in red. My position was among them. Our technical leadership structure reflects outdated hierarchies, she continued. We have brilliant engineers trapped in management roles, and managers trying to be engineers. It's time to streamline, to bring in fresh perspectives, to build the Trionics of tomorrow. My phone vibrated. A message from the Pentagon. Urgent security briefing tomorrow, 11:30 a.m., confirmation required. I typed a quick confirmation, my fingers steady despite the growing tension in the room. Around me, other senior technical staff were checking their phones, whispering to each other. Vanessa's transformation was about to claim its victims, and we all knew it. I want to address one example directly, Vanessa said, and somehow I knew what was coming before she said it. Alexis Ward. Every head in the room turned toward me. I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded calmly on my notebook. Alexis represents the old guard of Trionics, Vanessa continued. Brilliant. Yes. Dedicated. Absolutely. But stuck in patterns that no longer serve our mission, the role of Chief Security Engineer, as currently conceived, is a relic. We need dynamic, flexible teams, not rigid hierarchies. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a security badge. My security badge. I hadn't even noticed it was missing from my desk. Effective immediately. We're restructuring our entire technical organization. Some positions will be eliminated, others will be reimagined, and yes, some people will need to find opportunities that better match their skills. She held up my badge like a trophy. This badge represents the past. The future of Trionics requires courage to make hard decisions. With a theatrical gesture, she inserted the badge into a portable shredder she'd placed on the podium. The mechanical grinding sound filled the silent room. 20 years of work, of dedication, of building systems that protected national security, reduced to plastic fragments. Alexis, she said, turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We thank you for your service. HR will be in touch about your transition package. The room was absolutely still. Someone should have been breathing, shifting in their chair, something, but it was as if everyone had frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. I stood slowly, gathering my notebook and pen. Every eye tracked my movement. Vanessa's smile faltered slightly, perhaps expecting anger, tears, some kind of emotional response that would validate her power play. Instead, I simply said, I understand. My phone buzzed again, this time from Colonel Harrison. Seeing unusual activity in Aegis Core. Status. I typed back, Architect no longer present. System entering protective mode as designed. What does that mean? His response was immediate. Exactly what it sounds like. We'll discuss tomorrow at 11:30. I walked toward the exit, my footsteps the only sound in the room. As I reached the door, I turned back to address the room, not Vanessa. For those of you staying, I said quietly, the system documentation is in the usual place. Follow the protocols exactly as written. Any deviation could trigger security measures you're not prepared for. Dave Chen's face had gone pale. He understood what I meant. So did most of the senior engineers. Aegis Core wasn't just software. It was a living system that learned, adapted, and protected itself. And it knew my biometric signatures, my behavioral patterns, my very presence in ways that went far beyond a simple access badge. Vanessa's voice cut through the moment. Thank you. Alexis, I'm sure our team can handle any technical challenges. I met her eyes for the first time since she'd started speaking. I'm sure you believe that. Then I left, walking through the halls of the building I'd helped secure, past the people I'd worked with for years, knowing that none of them understood what had just been set in motion. In the elevator, I pulled out my personal phone and opened an app most people would assume was a calculator. In reality, it was my direct interface to Aegis Core's neural network. The system was already responding to my absence, activating protocols I'd written years ago but never expected to use. The November air was crisp as I exited the building. I didn't look back. Vanessa Ryland thought she'd just removed an obstacle to her transformation. In reality, she'd just pulled a pin from a grenade she didn't even know existed. By the time I reached my car, the first domino had already fallen. Aegis Corps' internal authentication system registered my badge destruction as a potential security breach. It began limiting access, requesting additional verification for every transaction. Nothing dramatic yet, just enough friction to slow things down. I drove home through the familiar streets of Arlington, my mind already 3 steps ahead. The Pentagon meeting tomorrow would be interesting. Jim Harrison was about to learn why the Department of Defense's primary security infrastructure had just developed trust issues. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. The caller ID showed Brad Williams, Trionix's head of security, and one of the few people who truly understood what Aegis Corps could do. "Alexis!" His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything, Brad. I was terminated. My access was revoked. The system is responding accordingly. It's requesting level 5 authentication for everything. We can't even access basic monitoring tools." That's the system protecting itself from unauthorized access. You know the protocols. "Alexis, please, you have to help us." I got out of my car and walked to my front door, keys in hand. "I no longer have authorized access to Trionix systems. Brad, any attempt to bypass security protocols would be illegal. I'm sure Vanessa's fresh perspectives will find a solution." "This isn't a joke. We have federal contracts that require continuous monitoring. If we can't maintain system integrity, then I suggest you follow the documented procedures exactly. Every step, every authentication requirement, every security measure. The system will recognize legitimate attempts to maintain it. The documentation references procedures only you have clearance for." I paused at my doorstep. "Then you have a problem." "Alexis." "Brad, I need to go. I have a meeting at the Pentagon tomorrow. I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear about Trionix's new approach to security management." I ended the call and entered my house. The space was exactly as I'd left it that morning. But everything had changed. On my desk sat 3 notebooks, physical notebooks filled with handwritten code, logic diagrams, and security protocols that existed nowhere else. The real heart of Aegis Corps wasn't in any computer. It was in these pages, in the elegant mathematical proofs that governed how the system protected itself. I made coffee and sat down at my desk, opening the first notebook. Page 1 contained a simple statement: a security system that cannot protect itself is not secure. It was the fundamental principle upon which I'd built everything. Aegis Corps didn't just guard against external threats. It monitored its own integrity, tracked authorized users, and responded to any attempt to compromise its core functions. The destruction of my badge, combined with my sudden absence from the network, had triggered exactly the response I'd designed. My secure laptop chimed. 17 new emails, all marked urgent. I ignored them and opened a different application, one connected to my personal monitoring system. Aegis Corps' activity levels were spiking across all federal installations. It wasn't malfunctioning, it was being extremely careful, demanding additional verification for every access attempt, slowing down to ensure no unauthorized changes could be made. Another email arrived, this one from a different source. The sender was listed only as JWHS, but I knew it was Jim Harrison using our agreed-upon protocol for sensitive communications. A. We're seeing significant performance degradation across all systems running your architecture. Briefing moved to 0800 tomorrow. Car will pick you up at 0700. This is now classified Priority 1. Priority 1 meant immediate threat to national security. I smiled grimly. Vanessa had no idea what she'd just done. I spent the rest of the day organizing my notes, preparing for tomorrow's meeting. The physical notebooks would come with me. They were my property, never part of my employment agreement with Trionix. They contained not just the code, but the philosophy behind Aegis Corps, the mathematical principles that made it virtually impossible to compromise. As evening fell, I received a text from Dave Chen. Emergency war room established. Vanessa brought in outside consultants. They're talking about cracking the system. Thought you should know. I texted back. Tell them to be very careful. Aegis Corps has opinions about brute force attacks. His response came quickly. Already started. System locked them out after 3 attempts. Now it's demanding biometric verification that includes retinal scans, voice patterns, and typing cadence analysis. We don't have that data for the consultants. You have it for authorized users, only at their specific workstations. Vanessa moved everyone to the conference room for collaborative problem solving. I shook my head. Every decision they were making was wrong, driven by panic and ego rather than understanding. Aegis Corps was designed to be maintained, not conquered. It would work with those it trusted and resist everyone else. My secure line rang. The caller ID showed a number I recognized: Deputy Secretary of Defense Patricia Chen. Ms. Ward? Her voice was calm but concerned. I'm calling to verify your current employment status with Trionyx Federal Systems. As of approximately 9:15 this morning, I am no longer employed by Trionyx. There was a pause. And the Aegis Corps system is functioning exactly as designed. It's protecting itself and the assets it guards until proper maintenance can be restored. Ms. Ward, I need to be very clear. Are you suggesting that a critical defense system is now operating autonomously? No, Deputy Secretary. I'm stating that Aegis Corps is following its documented security protocols in response to what it perceives as a potential compromise. It will continue to function, but it will be extremely selective about who it allows to interact with it. How selective? Think of it as a maximum security facility that just went into lockdown. It will maintain life support, but nobody's getting through any doors without proper authorization. Another pause, longer this time. The briefing tomorrow morning, will you be able to restore normal operations? That depends entirely on what Trionyx allows me to do. I no longer have legal access to their systems. I see. Thank you. Ms. Ward, we'll see you in the morning. The call ended, but I knew it was just the beginning. Somewhere in Washington, phones were ringing, emergency meetings were being scheduled, and people were beginning to understand that you couldn't simply fire the architect of a system that protected national security. I made dinner, reviewed my notes one more time, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would be a long day. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Brad. System just rejected Vanessa's override codes. She's threatening to sue you for sabotage. I typed back. Good luck proving I did anything. I haven't touched a keyboard since I left the building. She doesn't understand. She thinks you installed a kill switch. I installed a security system that trusts certain people and not others. She removed one of the people it trusts most. This is the result. Alexis, people's jobs are on the line. Then maybe they should have thought about that before shredding my badge in front of the entire company. I put the phone aside and went back to sleep. In a few hours, a government car would arrive, and I would explain to some very powerful people why their critical security infrastructure had suddenly become very particular about who it talked to. Vanessa Ryland wanted to transform Trionyx. She was about to learn that some systems transform back. The black SUV arrived precisely at 7 a.m. I was ready, wearing my best suit and carrying a leather briefcase containing the 3 notebooks. The driver, a young Marine in dress blues, simply nodded as I got in. We didn't speak during the ride, but I could see him checking his mirrors more frequently than necessary. Whatever briefing he'd received had made him nervous. Traffic was light as we crossed the Potomac. I watched the city wake up. Coffee shops opening, joggers taking advantage of the crisp morning. It all seemed so normal, so removed from the digital crisis unfolding in server rooms across the country. We bypassed the regular Pentagon entrance, heading instead to a secure facility I'd visited only twice before. The checkpoint procedures were extensive biometric scans, background verification, even a chemical detection sweep of my briefcase. They handled the notebooks with particular care, photographing each page before returning them to me. Colonel Harrison met me in a windowless conference room 3 floors underground. He looked tired, and I noticed he'd forgotten to shave one side of his jaw. "Alexis," he said, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming. Jim, long night. You have no idea. Aegis Corps started rejecting routine maintenance procedures at 2200 hours. By midnight, we had alerts from every installation running your system. It's not rejecting maintenance, it's requiring proper authorization. Authorization from someone who no longer works for the primary contractor. His tone was carefully neutral. You can see how that presents a problem. The door opened, and Deputy Secretary Chen entered, followed by two men I didn't recognize, but whose bearing screamed intelligence community. They took seats across from me, tablets and notebooks at the ready. Ms. Ward, Chen began without preamble. Let me be direct. 17 federal agencies rely on Aegis Corps for critical security functions. As of this morning, all 17 are experiencing significant operational degradation. Can you fix this? That depends on what you mean by fix. The system is operating correctly. It's protecting itself and the infrastructure it guards from what it perceives as unauthorized access. One of the unnamed men leaned forward. You designed it to lock out your own company. I designed it to recognize and trust certain behavioral patterns, biometric signatures, and operational procedures. When those patterns change suddenly and dramatically, such as when a primary architect's access is abruptly terminated, the system responds defensively. So this was intentional, he pressed. A dead man's switch. I met his gaze steadily. Everything about Aegis Corps is intentional. Every line of code, every security protocol, every response pattern. It's not a dead man's switch, it's a living system protecting itself. Chen raised a hand, stopping the brewing interrogation. Ms. Ward, we need to focus on solutions. What are our options? I opened my briefcase and removed the first notebook. Option 1. Trionyx follows the documented procedures for security transition. This involves a 90-day handover period where I train my replacements, gradually transferring biometric authorizations and behavioral patterns. The system will accept new administrators once it's confident they understand its requirements. Vanessa Ryland seems to have precluded that option, Harrison observed dryly. Option 2, I continued, turning to a different section. Trionyx authorizes me as an external consultant to manage the transition. I maintain temporary access while training their new team. This would require significant oversight to ensure I don't exceed authorized parameters. And if Ryland refuses both options, Chen asked, I close the notebook. Then you have option 3. The federal government exercises its emergency procurement authority, assumes direct control of Aegis Corps, and we build a new management structure from scratch. The room fell silent. The implications of option 3 were staggering billions in contract disputes, legal challenges, and the complete restructuring of federal cybersecurity management. There might be a fourth option, I said quietly. If you're interested. Chen leaned back. Go on. Aegis Corps was always bigger than Trionyx. The company was just the vehicle for its development and deployment. What if we formalize that separation? Meaning, create an independent entity responsible for critical infrastructure security. Transfer Aegis Corps and related systems to this new organization. Staff it with people who understand that security isn't about disruption or transformation, it's about vigilance and consistency. The unnamed men exchanged glances. One of them pulled out a phone and stepped out of the room. When he returned, he nodded to Chen. Tell us more about this entity, Chen said. For the next 2 hours, I laid out a vision I'd been refining since the moment Vanessa shredded my badge. An organization that would exist at the intersection of public service and private expertise, funded by the government but operating independently, staffed by the best security minds in the country, regardless of their age or adherence to Silicon Valley aesthetics. What would you call it? Harrison asked. Fire grid, I said. Federal Infrastructure Resilience Entity for Governmental Resilience and Integrated Defense. Chen made notes on her tablet. And you would run this organization. If asked, yes. But more importantly, I would ensure Aegis Corps and its successor systems are managed by people who understand them, people who recognize that in our field. Boring is good. Boring means the system is working. Boring means no one is breaking in. The unnamed man who'd made the phone call spoke for the first time in an hour. "We've been discussing something similar at the NSC for months. Recent events in the private sector have highlighted the vulnerability of outsourcing critical infrastructure to companies that prioritize profit over security." "Recent events," I asked. "3 major contractors have undergone transformational leadership changes in the past year. In each case, system integrity suffered. Yours is simply the most dramatic example." My phone buzzed. A text from Dave. "Vanessa just fired Brad for insubordination. She's bringing in a team from her last company to modernize our security infrastructure." I showed the message to the room. Chen's expression hardened. "How long before Aegis Corps completely locks them out?" she asked. "At the rate they're going, 48 hours, maybe less. The system increases its security requirements exponentially in response to repeated unauthorized access attempts. Eventually, it will only accept input from terminals it absolutely trusts, using protocols that can't be spoofed or bypassed. And then it runs in maintenance mode indefinitely. It will continue to protect federal systems, block intrusions, and maintain security, but it won't accept updates, won't adapt to new threats, won't evolve. It will slowly become obsolete while still being impossible to replace." Harrison stood up. "I need to brief the secretary. Patricia, I recommend we move forward with emergency procedures immediately." Chen nodded. "Ms. Ward, are you willing to help us stabilize the situation while we work through the legal framework for your proposal?" "Under what authority?" "I'm prepared to offer you a direct commission as a technical advisor to the Department of Defense. Effective immediately, it would give you the legal standing to access Aegis Corps while we sort out the larger issues." I considered the offer. It was a temporary solution, but it would at least stop the bleeding. "I'll need specific guarantees," I said, "including protection from any legal action Trionyx might pursue." "Our lawyers are standing by," Chen assured me. The next several hours passed in a blur of paperwork, security clearances, and technical briefings. By noon, I had a new badge, this one issued by the DoD rather than a contractor. By 2 p.m., I was in a secure facility, logged into Aegis Corps for the first time since my termination. The system recognized me immediately. Authentication protocols that had been growing increasingly strict relaxed. Status indicators shifted from yellow and red back to green. It was like watching a guard dog recognize its owner after a tense standoff. "Hello, old friend," I murmured, reviewing the logs from the past day. What I saw made me wince. Vanessa's new team had tried everything: brute force attacks, SQL injections, even attempts to physically bypass security hardware. Each attempt had made Aegis Corps more paranoid, more protective. They were essentially teaching it that Trionyx could no longer be trusted. My secure phone rang. The caller ID showed Vanessa Ryland. "Ms. Ward," her voice was cold, professional. "I understand you're interfering with Trionyx operations. I'm performing authorized maintenance on federal systems at the request of the Department of Defense. Those systems are managed under our contracts. Any access without our permission is a violation." "Ms. Ryland," I interrupted, "I suggest you have your legal team review Section 15.3.2 of your federal contracts. It specifically allows for emergency government intervention in cases where contractor actions threaten system integrity. My actions. You're the one who sabotaged." "I did nothing. I was terminated. The system responded to that termination according to its documented protocols. If you had read those protocols, you would have known this would happen. This is extortion, corporate sabotage. I'll have you arrested. You're welcome to try. In the meantime, I have work to do. Good day, Ms. Ryland." I ended the call and returned to my screens. Aegis Corps needed reassurance, careful coaxing to accept that temporary measures were being put in place. I began implementing a transition protocol, one that would allow a small group of cleared personnel to maintain basic operations while keeping Vanessa's cowboys locked out. Dave Chen appeared on my secure messenger. "Alexis, thank God. Vanessa's losing it. She just announced that anyone who communicates with you will be terminated. Then why are you messaging me? Because I just submitted my resignation, along with 6 other senior engineers. We're not sticking around for whatever comes next. I paused in my work. Dave, don't make any rash decisions because of me. It's not about you, it's about what she represents. We've spent years building something that matters, and she wants to turn it into just another tech company. Move fast and break things doesn't work when the things you break protect national security. He was right, of course. Vanessa's Silicon Valley mentality was incompatible with the patient, careful work of infrastructure security. She saw Aegis Core as legacy code to be disrupted, rather than a carefully balanced system that had taken years to perfect. There might be opportunities soon, I told him. Keep your clearance active. You're up to something. The government is exploring options. That's all I can say right now. By evening, I had stabilized the major systems. Aegis Core was still wary, still protective, but no longer actively hostile to all access attempts. I documented everything, creating a clear chain of evidence showing that the system's behavior was a direct result of Trionix's actions, not any sabotage on my part. Harrison appeared in the facility as I was finishing up. "How bad is it?" he asked. "I've bought us time, maybe 2 weeks before the restrictions I've put in place start causing problems. We need a permanent solution before then." "Chen's fast-tracking your proposal. She has buy-in from the Secretary and preliminary approval from the White House. They want FireGrid operational within 30 days. That's impossible." "That's what I told them. They said you've done impossible before." I laughed, short and bitter. "Building Aegis Core took 3 years. You're not building from scratch this time. You're transferring existing infrastructure to a new management structure. Different challenge." He was right. The technical pieces existed. What we needed was the organizational framework, the legal authority, and most importantly, the people. "I'll need my core team," I said. "The ones who actually understand the system. Make a list. We'll make offers they can't refuse." "And Trionix," Harrison's expression was grim. "Let's just say Vanessa Ryland is about to learn that when you threaten national security to prove a point about transformation, the government transforms right back." I spent another hour documenting the day's work, then headed home in the same black SUV that had picked me up that morning. The driver was different, older, more relaxed. "Interesting day," he asked. The first words any of the drivers had spoken to me. "You could say that." "My daughter's in cybersecurity," he offered. "Says it's like being a digital bodyguard. That true?" I thought about it. "More like being a digital immune system. We're not just protecting against specific threats. We're maintaining the health of the entire organism." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds important." "It is." Back home, I found my personal email flooded with messages. Word was spreading through the security community. Engineers from other contractors, government specialists, academics all reaching out, all sensing that something fundamental was shifting in our world. Among them was a message that made me pause. The sender was listed as V. Ryland, but the tone was different from our earlier conversation. "Ms. Ward, I believe we got off on the wrong foot. I'd like to discuss a possible resolution that benefits everyone. Would you be willing to meet privately, off the record? I'm beginning to understand that I may have misunderstood the complexity of what you built." I stared at the message for a long time. Was this genuine recognition or another attempt at manipulation? Either way, a meeting might provide useful intelligence about Trionix's plans. I replied with a single line. "Tomorrow, 6 p.m., the Mayflower Hotel Bar." Her response was immediate. "Thank you. I'll be there." The next morning started with a secure video conference with Chen and a room full of people I didn't recognize. Lawyers, procurement specialists, personnel managers, the machinery of government grinding into motion. "Ms. Ward," Chen began, "we're prepared to move forward with FireGrid, but we need to discuss structure and authority. For the next 3 hours, we hammered out details, budget allocations, reporting structures, security clearances. It was mind-numbing but necessary work. By the end, we had a framework not perfect, but functional enough to begin. We're announcing this tomorrow, Chen informed me. The president wants to get ahead of any negative press about federal security vulnerabilities. You'll be named as executive director, pending formal confirmation procedures. And Trionyx will be informed that their contracts are under review. We're not canceling them yet, but they'll need to demonstrate their ability to maintain the systems they're responsible for. Without access to Aegis Core, they can't demonstrate anything, which is why we're offering them a transition period, 6 months to adapt to the new structure. They can either work with FireGrid or find themselves gradually excluded from federal contracts. It was a lifeline for Trionyx. If they were smart enough to take it, somehow, I doubted Vanessa would see it that way. That afternoon, I met with the team I hoped to recruit for FireGrid. We gathered in a secure conference room, the kind with walls that blocked all electronic signals. Dave Chen was there, along with Brad Williams, who had indeed been fired, Sarah Martinez from NSA, Tom Bradley from Homeland Security, and a half-dozen others. I can't promise you easy work, I told them. The hours will be long, the challenge is immense, and the recognition minimal. But we'll be building something that matters, something that lasts. What about our current obligations? Sarah asked. I'm in the middle of 3 projects at NSA. We're working on formal transfer procedures. Think of it as a detail assignment initially, with the option to make it permanent once we're established. Brad leaned forward. Alexis, level with us. Is this about sticking it to Vanessa, or is this real? Look at what happened yesterday, I said. One CEO's ego nearly compromised 17 federal agencies. That's not acceptable. FireGrid is about ensuring it never happens again. By nationalizing cybersecurity. By creating a hybrid model, we'll work with private contractors, but critical systems will be under direct oversight. No more letting MBAs play with infrastructure they don't understand. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. By the end, I had tentative commitments from everyone. They understood what we were building and why it mattered. At 5:45 p.m., I walked into the Mayflower Hotel bar. It was old Washington dark wood, leather chairs, the kind of place where deals had been made for a century. Vanessa was already there, sitting in a corner booth, her electric blue replaced by muted gray. Ms. Ward? She stood as I approached. Thank you for coming. I sat across from her, ordered a scotch, and waited. In negotiations, the first person to speak usually loses. I underestimated you, she finally said, and more importantly, I underestimated what you built. Aegis Core isn't about ego or power plays. It's about protecting critical infrastructure. I see that now. She took a sip of her martini. My team tells me we're locked out for at least another month, possibly permanently. They also tell me the government is creating some new organization to manage federal security. I said nothing. With you in charge, I assume? The government makes its own decisions. She laughed, short and bitter. Come on, Alexis. We're both adults here. You orchestrated this perfectly. The system lockout, the government intervention, the new organization. You played 3-dimensional chess while I was playing checkers. You're giving me too much credit. I simply built a system that protects itself. Everything else followed naturally from your decision to ignore its requirements. My board is furious, she admitted. Stock price dropped 12% today. We're facing potential lawsuits from subcontractors who can't access systems they need. What do you want? Vanessa? She leaned forward. A deal. A path forward that doesn't destroy Trionyx. We have good people, important contracts beyond Aegis Core. I may have made mistakes, but the company doesn't deserve to die for them. What are you proposing? Transition support. We help establish your new organization, provide resources, personnel, whatever you need. In exchange, we maintain our other contracts and get a seat at the table for future opportunities. It was more generous than I'd expected. Either she was truly desperate, or she'd finally understood the reality of the situation. I can't make that decision alone, I said, but I can present it to the relevant parties. That's all I ask. She paused. And Alexis, I'm sorry. About the badge, the public humiliation, all of it. I thought I was being a strong leader. I was just being a fool. Apologies from executives were rare. This one seemed genuine, though it didn't change anything. We all make mistakes, I said. The question is whether we learn from them. I'm trying to learn. My background is in rapid scaling, disruption, moving fast. I didn't understand that some things require patience and respect. Federal security isn't a startup. You can't pivot when things go wrong. You can't fail fast when failure means compromise national security. I understand that now. The question is whether it's too late. I finished my scotch. That depends entirely on what you do next. FireGrid will exist whether Trionyx cooperates or not, but there's room for partnership if you're willing to accept that some systems shouldn't be disrupted. My board might not agree. Then you have a choice to make. Fight the inevitable and lose, or adapt and survive. She stared into her martini. You really did plan all this, didn't you? I planned for the possibility that someone would try to compromise Aegis Core. The specific triggering event was your choice, not mine. If I hadn't fired you, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. But eventually, someone else would have made a similar mistake. The system was always bigger than any one company. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the bar filled with the usual Washington crowd, lobbyists, staffers, journalists, all trading information and influence. I'll take your proposal to the board, Vanessa said finally. But I need something from you. What? Time. A few days to convince them, to restructure our approach. Can you keep the system stable until then? I can maintain current operations for 2 weeks. After that, decisions need to be made. 2 weeks, she nodded. I can work with that. I stood to leave. Vanessa, a word of advice. The people you fired, Brad, Dave, the others, they're the ones who actually understand your systems. If you're serious about adapting, you might want to reconsider those terminations. Already done. I've sent offers to return with full reinstatement. Most haven't responded. They're waiting to see what happens next. Show them you're serious about changing, and some might come back. I left her there, staring into her glass, perhaps finally understanding the weight of what she'd tried to control. The next morning, everything accelerated. Chen called at 6 a.m. to inform me that the president had signed an executive order establishing FireGrid. The announcement would come at noon, catching everyone off guard. We need you here for the press briefing, she said. Dress formally. This is your introduction to the world. I'd spent 15 years avoiding the spotlight. Now I was about to be thrust into it. But this wasn't about me. It was about protecting the systems that protected the nation. The White House briefing room was smaller than it looked on TV. I stood to the side as the press secretary introduced the concept of FireGrid, explained the need for enhanced cybersecurity measures, and then called me forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the executive director of FireGrid, Alexis Ward. I approached the podium, looking out at a sea of reporters. Cameras clicked, phones recorded, and somewhere, Vanessa Ryland was watching her carefully constructed world restructure itself around the system she'd tried to dismiss. Good afternoon, I began. Most of you have never heard of Aegis Core or the dozens of other systems that protect our federal infrastructure. That's by design. Good security is invisible until it fails. Recent events have shown us that we can't rely solely on private contractors to maintain systems critical to national security. FireGrid represents a new approach, one that balances private innovation with public oversight. The questions came fast and hard. Was this nationalization? How would it affect private contractors? What about costs? I answered carefully, sticking to prepared talking points while avoiding technical details that might compromise security. Ms. Ward, one reporter called out, is it true that you were recently terminated by Trionyx Federal Systems, and that this led directly to the creation of FireGrid? I'd expected this question. Personnel decisions at private companies are their own business. What matters is that critical systems continue to function regardless of corporate changes. FireGrid ensures that continuity. But didn't Aegis Core lock out Trionyx after your termination? Aegis Corps responded to a change in its operating environment according to its security protocols. This highlighted the need for more stable management of critical systems. It was a diplomatic answer that said nothing while confirming everything. The reporters sensed there was more to the story, but I wasn't going to give them the drama they craved. After the briefing, I was escorted to a secure facility in Virginia that would serve as FireGrid's temporary headquarters. The space was utilitarian government gray walls, fluorescent lighting, the smell of fresh paint trying to cover decades of use, but it was ours. Over the next week, my recruited team arrived one by one. We set up operations, established secure connections to federal systems, and began the delicate process of assuming oversight of Aegis Corps and related infrastructure. Dave Chen was my first official hire. Taking the role of Chief Technology Officer, his relief at escaping Trionyx was palpable. Vanessa called me personally, he told me over coffee, offered double my salary to come back. And I told her some things can't be bought. She didn't understand that either. Brad Williams joined us 3 days later as head of security operations. Turning down Vanessa's offer was the easiest decision I've ever made, he said. I want to work somewhere that values security over stock prices. By the end of the first week, we had a core team of 12. Small, but each person was worth 10 average engineers. They understood not just the technical aspects, but the philosophy behind secure systems. The transition wasn't without challenges. Trionyx fought us at every turn, filing legal challenges, spreading FUD about government overreach, trying to maintain control of systems they could no longer access. But each move only demonstrated why FireGrid was necessary. On day 10, I received an unexpected visitor. Colonel Harrison arrived with someone I recognized but had never met, General Patricia Matthews, head of Cyber Command. Ms. Ward, the general said, I've been watching your progress. Impressive work under difficult circumstances. Thank you. General, we're just getting started. I know, which is why I'm here. Cyber Command wants to formalize our relationship with FireGrid, joint operations, shared intelligence, coordinated defense, interested. It was the opportunity I'd hoped for but hadn't expected so soon. Very interested. Good. Jim will coordinate the details, but I wanted to meet you personally, to understand the person we're trusting with so much. And your assessment, she smiled. You remind me of the engineers who built NORAD. More interested in function than credit. That's exactly what we need. After they left, I stood in my sparse office, looking out at the parking lot filling with cars as my team arrived for another long day. We were building something important, something that would outlast any CEO's vision or boardroom drama. My phone buzzed, a message from Vanessa. Board approved cooperation agreement, ready to discuss terms. I typed back, Monday, 10 a.m., FireGrid headquarters. Bring your technical leads, not your lawyers. Understood. And Alexis, thank you for keeping the lights on. It was as close to humility as she was likely to get. I filed it away and returned to my work. 2 weeks later, FireGrid was fully operational. We'd assumed control of Aegis Corps and 6 other critical systems, established protocols for working with private contractors, and begun developing the next generation of security infrastructure. The formal transition ceremony was held in a Pentagon conference room. No media this time, just the people who mattered: government officials, military leadership, and representatives from the contractors who'd agreed to work within the new framework. Vanessa attended, sitting quietly in the back. She'd survived the board's wrath, implemented the reforms necessary to maintain Trionyx's other contracts, and learned a valuable lesson about respecting the systems that really mattered. After the ceremony, she approached me. Congratulations, Alexis, you've built something remarkable. We've built a foundation. The real work is maintaining it. I wanted you to know I've hired a new chief security officer, someone who understands that boring is good, as you put it. We're also implementing mandatory technical education for all executives. Never again will management make decisions about systems they don't understand. That's a start. She hesitated, then extended her hand. I hope FireGrid and Trionix can work together productively in the future. I shook her hand. As long as you remember that some things shouldn't be disrupted. Lesson learned, painfully, but learned. As she walked away, Dave appeared at my elbow. Think she means it. Doesn't matter. The systems are protected now. That's what counts. 6 months later, FireGrid had grown to 50 employees and secured oversight of 23 critical systems. We'd prevented 4 major intrusion attempts, identified numerous vulnerabilities, and established ourselves as the gold standard for infrastructure security. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked. Ms. Ward, there's someone here to see you. Says her name is Vanessa Ryland. I looked up, surprised. We'd had minimal contact since the transition, mostly formal communications about contract requirements. Send her in, Vanessa entered, but she looked different. Gone was the corporate power suit. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Alexis, thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you? Vanessa. I wanted to tell you personally I'm stepping down as CEO of Trionix. The board and I agreed it was time for new leadership. I'm sorry to hear that. And I was. Partially. She'd learned from her mistakes, implemented real changes. Don't be. It's the right decision. I'm a disruptor, a transformer. Trionix needs a maintainer, someone who understands the long game. She smiled. I'm actually here for another reason. I'm starting a new venture, focusing on cybersecurity education for executives, teaching MBAs like me why they should respect the boring systems that keep everything running. That's unexpected. You opened my eyes, Alexis. Not just to my own ignorance, but to a massive gap in how we train business leaders. They learn finance, strategy, marketing, but nothing about the technical infrastructure their decisions affect. And you want to fix that. I want to try, which is why I'm here. I'd like FireGrid to be a partner, guest lectures, case studies, maybe even internship programs. Show future executives what real security work looks like. It was an interesting proposal. Educational outreach was part of our mandate, and having a reformed CEO teaching others might be powerful. Send me a formal proposal. We'll consider it. I will. And Alexis, I wanted to apologize again, properly this time. What I did, the public humiliation, the arrogance, it was wrong. You deserved better. We all make mistakes. Vanessa, what matters is what we do after. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. You know, when I shredded your badge, I thought I was demonstrating strength. But real strength was what you did, protecting the systems even after being dismissed. That's the lesson I want to teach. After she left, I returned to my reports, but my mind wandered. 6 months ago, I'd been an anonymous engineer protecting systems in the shadows. Now I ran an organization that safeguarded national security, had testified before Congress twice, and become the public face of infrastructure defense, but at the core, nothing had changed. Every morning, I reviewed the logs. Every evening, I checked the status indicators, green lights across the board, systems humming quietly, threats identified and neutralized before they could cause harm. Boring work, essential work, my work. The phone rang, another crisis somewhere, another system needing protection. I answered it with the same words I always used. FireGrid, Ward speaking. How can we help? Because in the end, that's what we did. We helped. We protected. We maintained. And somewhere in the Pentagon, the White House, and dozens of federal agencies, Aegis Corps and its siblings stood watch, silent guardians in a digital age, protecting the nation one line of code at a time. Vanessa had wanted transformation. She got it, just not the kind she'd expected. Sometimes the most profound transformations aren't about disruption or innovation. Sometimes they're about recognizing what already works and protecting it from those who would carelessly tear it down. I pulled up the latest threat analysis and got back to work. There would always be new challenges, new attacks, new executives who thought they knew better, but now, there was also FireGrid, and we would be ready. The real revenge, I realized, wasn't in destroying Trionix or humiliating Vanessa. It was in building something better, something that would endure long after the corporate drama was forgotten. It was in proving that competence matters more than charisma, that understanding trumps disruption, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to let someone break what you've built. My computer chimed another authentication request from Aegis Corps. I approved it with a smile. We were still here, still watching, still protecting, and that was the greatest revenge of all.